Welcome to episode 2 of The Roadmap to Ruin, How the Church Can Resist the Dismantling of Democracy. I'm your host, Dr. Jamar Tisby. This is episode 2, The Architects of Ruin. What we have to realize is that this roadmap didn't emerge out of nowhere. As a matter of fact, there have been individuals and organizations who have systematically, methodically worked over the span of decades to lead to this present anti-democratic moment. In this episode, we're going to talk about those individuals and organizations by name, because many times they do their work in the shadows and in secret, but not anymore. When it comes to uncovering the architects of this roadmap, the most helpful recent book I've found is called Money, Lies, and God by investigative journalist Catherine Stewart. She actually goes to these conservative meetings and conferences and is in the room as they're making plans and they are talking about what they're going to do. In her book, she talks about the 5 pillars of an anti-democratic movement, really 5 different roles that all kinds of people can play. So those 5 roles are the funders, the thinkers, the sergeants, the infantry, and the power players. Let's define each of them so we know kind of where people are situated. Let's start with the money people, the funders. These are the billionaires bankrolling the destruction of democracy. Some notable funders would include Betsy DeVos, the former education secretary in Trump's first term. The Wilkes brothers, who are Texas billionaires funding Christian nationalist policies. Rebecca Mercer, who funded Breitbart and a big part of Trump's 2016 campaign. Tim Dunn, a major donor behind Texas's most extreme right-wing policies. Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, who are behind the judicial takeover of the Supreme Court and other courts. And organizations such as Donors Trust, which form these dark money networks, and it's how billions of dollars are funneled anonymously to advance authoritarian goals. Now, the thinkers are the ideological architects of Christian nationalism and authoritarianism. They provide an intellectual veneer that provides a legitimacy to certain people for their radical policies. Let's talk about some key institutions in this thinkers class. One of them is the Claremont Institute, which we'll talk a lot more about. That's sort of the intellectual home of Trumpism, if you will, and they're popularizing this idea of a second American revolution. We can talk about the Heritage Foundation. They're the architects of Project 2025. We'll talk more about them. The Manhattan Institute and the Cato Institute. These organizations are pushing for deregulation and privatization under the guise of small government. And of course, different colleges and institutions which are training the next generation of right-wing activists as we speak. The third category are the sergeants, mobilizers who turn money into political power. So this is where we cross that bridge from ideology and money into actual politics and policy. They are super lobbyists. They are strategic operatives, people like Ralph Reed of the Faith and Freedom Coalition or Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. We can talk about the Council for National Policy, a secretive network of religious right leaders, politicians, and donors who are strategizing authoritarianism behind closed doors. We can even talk about events like the National Prayer Breakfast. Sounds innocent enough, right? But these are places where political power brokers and religious people intersect to coordinate anti-democratic action. There's a fourth group, and we can call those the infantry, the grassroots foot soldiers carrying out the agenda, carrying out the marching orders. There's a group called the Black Robe Regiment. These are preachers advocating for a theocratic government. There is the Reawaken America Tour, which literally takes the show on the road, attracting thousands of people to their events, where they spread QAnon theories, anti-vaccine conspiracies, and even dominionist theology that the government should be a theocratic government. And there are other groups, such as Moms for Liberty, which are taking over local school boards. They are banning books. They're attacking LGBTQ plus rights. They are trying to rewrite history curricula. These are the infantry carrying out the ideologies that are put in place and funded by other people. And then there's a fifth group, the power players. These are the elites profiting off of the chaos. And this isn't just about ideology. These leaders are accumulating wealth and power to a staggering degree. Who am I talking about? Folks like Rupert Murdoch and Fox News. And it's promoting the role of propaganda in spreading extremist ideas. People like Elon Musk, who not only bought Twitter, one of the loudest and most important social media spaces in the world, but also is now heading up the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is in charge of a lot of these budget cuts and firings that we're seeing. People like Jared Kushner, who's got an international connection at the intersection of authoritarianism and personal financial self-interest. Only by understanding these different roles and some of the players within them can we begin to get a fuller grasp of what's actually at work behind the scenes in this authoritarian, oligarchical takeover of the US government. Do you remember the controversy about critical race theory? There was all this anti-CRT stuff floating around both on the internet and social media, but also in politics and policy. Well, that has an origin. There are architects behind the anti-critical race theory hysteria, and we have the evidence. And a right-wing activist named Christopher Rufo posted this on X, formerly known as Twitter. We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand category. Rufo goes on to say, the goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans. Just like Project 2025, they laid out the plan right in front of us, but not enough of us paid attention, or we just didn't take effective action. But Chris Rufo himself doesn't come out of nowhere. As a matter of fact, he is funded and supported to put out just these type of messages. So let's talk about one of the organizations that is the architect of this ruin. It's called the Claremont Institute. Not many people have heard of the Claremont Institute, but you've certainly felt the effects of its work. It was established in 1979, and according to the Claremont Institute's own website, it says the mission of the Claremont Institute is to restore the principles of the American founding to their rightful, preeminent authority in our national life. Now you can kind of guess what principles of the American founding they're talking about. It goes on to say, the principles that it emphasizes are the doctrines of natural rights and natural law found in the Declaration of Independence, the ingenious political science of the Constitution, and the popular constitutionalism or reverence necessary for the maintenance of free government. You know, what I find ironic about this is that in their pursuit of supporting the ingenious political science of the Constitution, they are undermining the Constitution and democracy itself. How do they do that? They have an extensive strategy that we have to understand. So they want to teach these principles, and they do so effectively through education, litigating, leading, and writing. Here are some of the educational programs that it has. The Publius Fellowship, which targets young writers and academics, recruiting the next generation of thinkers. When we're talking about those 5 categories, here's where they train them. The Lincoln Fellowship, which is designed for mid-career professionals in public policy, media, and related fields. You know who was a Lincoln Fellow? Christopher Rufo. You know who else was a Lincoln Fellow? Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, designed to recruit college students into these right-wing activist circles. These are all funded and supported through fellowships at the Claremont Institute. But it goes on. There's the John Marshall Fellowship, which focuses on legal professionals and scholars so they can use the courts to challenge democracy and install authoritarian rule. There is a Speech Writers Fellowship, which caters to individuals involved in crafting speeches and public communication. There's even a Sheriff's Fellowship, which aims to educate law enforcement leaders on constitutional principles. Organizations like the Claremont Institute aren't just about education, they're about right-wing activism. They're about advocacy and influence. So they do this through things like publishing. The Claremont Institute has the Claremont Review of Books, which again is designed to give an intellectual veneer and a scholarly kind of covering for their right-wing, extremist, authoritarian ideas. They're involved in litigation. The Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence engages in legal advocacy to uphold constitutional governance, and they're engaged in policy development. Organizations like the Center for the American Way of Life focus on restoring political liberty by equipping the right with moral confidence, ideas, and policies. What we need to understand, this is not a haphazard group of loudmouth people on social media. This is a well-organized, well-funded to the tune of hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, organizational framework that recruits people, trains them, deploys them, supports them, indoctrinates them, and all of this is happening way below the surface of the headlines you might read on any given day. I want you to listen to this clip by the actor Taraji P. Henson in 2024 before the November 2024 presidential election. Check it out.
I'm telling y'all, you better show up and show out with them ballots. I'm being serious now. I know I look good, but it's a serious time. I need y'all to listen. Show up and show out when it's time to vote, because it's not just about the presidential election, you guys. It's time for us to play chess, not checkers. It's about making decisions that will affect us as human beings, our careers, our next generations to come. Did you know that it is now a crime to be homeless? Pay attention. It's not a secret. Look it up. They are attacking our most vulnerable citizens. The Project 2025 plan is not a game. Look it up. They are trying to bring the draft back. Who do you think they're going to draft first? I'm not trying to scare us. I'm trying to inform us. We got 3 Supreme Court seats up, you guys. We need those seats, or we have no protection.
This was a major moment leading up to the November 2024 presidential election. Why? Because Project 2025 was finally gaining mainstream coverage. Scholars like me had known about the plan since it was first published back in 2023. We were jumping and screaming and yelling, trying to get folks to pay attention, and not until the lead up in the final days of the election and the summer before did enough people start to finally pay attention. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Not only did President Trump win the presidential election, but now he's implementing Project 2025 wholesale. This despite his vociferous insistence that he knew nothing about the plan. What is Project 2025? Well, you've probably heard of it by now, but we should revisit it because it's happening in real time. According to the plan itself, it is the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, which is the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 noon, January 20th, 2025. That, of course, was Inauguration Day. And as you'll recall, Trump signed dozens of executive orders on Inauguration Day, many of them almost copy and pasted from Project 2025. The architects of Project 2025 reject what they call the administrative state. They argue that the federal government is too big, too inefficient, and has too much red tape to be effective. Now listen, we've all had our run-ins with bureaucracy. There are certainly improvements that can be made. But understand this, they don't want to reform and improve, they want to demolish and consolidate power. What is the point of trying to deconstruct or defund organizations like the Federal Aviation Administration that keeps us safe in the air and traveling? What about the EPA? What about even the National Park Service? This isn't just about improving government. This is about dismantling government and the systems that keep our country running. One huge red flag of Project 2025 is how they want to reclassify civil servants so they can be easily hired and fired by the president himself. Understand, under normal circumstances, these are career civil servants, and they don't change based on whatever new administration is in the White House. As a matter of fact, their consistency across different administrations ensures effectiveness and expertise in vital roles. But Project 2025 wants to reclassify these federal workers so they can be hired and fired at will, basically installing cronies that will only agree with the president, and the only qualification is loyalty, not expertise. Listen to this quote from the Guardian newspaper. Only about 4,000 federal employees are now political appointees. The rest of the more than 2 million civil servants hold their jobs regardless of party control and develop expertise that keeps critical services functioning. Schedule F would classify far more roles as policy-related, about 50,000 more, giving Trump a huge amount of power to roll out his agenda. This is what's in that 900-page plan of Project 2025 and what is now being enacted at the federal level. This all falls under the heading of unitary executive power, which is a theory that says the president has absolute power over the executive branch, which in practice means that no expert, no career civil servant, no organization within the executive branch or government should dictate or have any real say in what happens. The president has the absolute final word. In the Jamar Tisby translation of unitary executive power, it wants to make the president a king. Going further, Project 2025 wasn't just some random assemblage of right-wing activists who got together and wrote a document. There was an organization behind it. It's called the Heritage Foundation. Let's talk about it. The Heritage Foundation is a DC-based think tank founded in 1973. We know of Project 2025, but it's also called the Mandate for Leadership. And Project 2025 wasn't the first one. The Heritage Foundation has been behind many Mandate for Leadership documents dating all the way back to the Reagan administration. They've had a lot of practice at this. A key figure behind Project 2025 with connections to the Heritage Foundation and is now deeply installed in Trump's administration is a man named Russell Vought. In my view, Russell Vought is one of the most dangerous people in this political regime. He is the head of the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. This is actually his second turn at that job. He held the same position during Trump's first administration. Now he's back at it, badder than ever before. Vaught is a Wheaton College grad, which means he's familiar with the Christian and evangelical landscape. He also believes the administrative state is the greatest threat to our country today, and he wants to completely dismantle it. And he's in a very powerful position to do so. He wrote one of the key sections in Project 2025, the part on executive power. According to Vaught, he argues that democracy cannot be saved unless, quote, the grip of woke and weaponized government is broken. He goes on to say, in a video at an event, so these are his words coming from his mouth in a recording, he says, "We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. When they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down. We want to put them in trauma." Russell Vaught is in a cabinet-approved position. Our political leaders voted to install a man who wants to traumatize career civil servants for doing their jobs. He goes on and he said in an interview that the OMB is the nerve center of the federal budget. It's about the money. It has the ability to turn off the spending that is going on at the agencies and to control all of government execution. Russell Vaught is now in a key position to be able to control the funding for all kinds of government agencies, many of which do vital, necessary, important, and helpful work. In my view, Russell Vaught is one of the most dangerous of Trump's appointees, and he's more dangerous because so few people even know about him. This is how the roadmap to ruin is built. There are architects who are intentionally making plans and executing those plans over the course of decades and funded to the tune of billions of dollars to make the roadmap to ruin happen. If we don't expose and resist this architecture right now, democracy won't just die. It will be replaced by a system that will never allow democracy again.